Decades ago, the iconic rivalry between the Evo and the WRX solidified both of the cars as absolute JDM legends. Both all-wheel drive homologation specials, the battles that were waged between the two on dirt spread to the streets as the relatively affordable sports cars ended up being tuner favorites and both grew to be household names. It's been 20 years since we last saw the Evo and the WRC, but today, for only a brief moment, we try to rekindle a rivalry that created the two legends. In Race C this week, the G70 was the clear meta at the start of the week, but the Atenza has been shown to be just as good or even better. I was initially concerned that choosing the WRX as my anti-meta was a mistake, but with the Atenza and G70 being so close in performance, it seems the WRX truly is the best choice over the dual meta, with the Evo being either as good or just slightly worse. Our friend Damien has the fastest non-Atenza or G70 time in the world with the WRX all the way down in 138th place, and he also holds the third fastest time in the Atenza, which shows the pace disparity. Slayers and I have been trying to make the bad cars work through teamwork, and in fact, thanks to Damien, Chris, and Lewis, on Wednesday, we ensured that not a single G70 won all throughout my stream. At the end of the day today, however, we managed to find ourselves in first and second place and decided to just go for it. We've been working together to try to beat Distinct Asteria in the G70, but ultimately failed, and when trying to jump back in for one last shot, Asteria had to log off. Slayers and I almost never get the chance to race head-to-head, and in fact, this may be the only time we've ever raced from the front of the pack together. We generally only meet on track at the back during our streams, so this was very special to me. Right behind me was a mystery driver in a Lambo with a good qualifying time. From my testing, I thought the Lambo was the worst of the all-wheel drive cars, even slower than some of the FF cars, but seeing their quality time made me question that notion. With J-Funk right behind him, I'd assumed they would both be able to charge up and get in the mix between Slayers and I. J-Funk is a friend of mine and a longtime supporter of the channel who has been getting very fast recently. And when it comes to mystery drivers with good quality times, usually it means it's a fast person we're aware of having a laugh on a secret account. After clearing T1, I wanted to monitor the delta between myself and the Lambo, and it appeared he was very much able to keep up, so I knew I had to be absolutely on point in order to sit close enough to Slayers before I had to defend. If the Lambo was aggressive, it could spell the end of my battle with Slayers before it had even started. There's no way I could battle anyone and keep up with a completely free Slayers. As soon as we cleared T2, however, it seemed that the Lambo was not actually a factor and Slayers was about to encounter the true threat to our battle: the penalties. For whatever reason, the penalties at Red Bull Ring are atrocious, and I don't think I'm alone in saying the penalty system in GT7 is just as terrible. With a bouncy line through T1, relatively obscure limits on each corner, and such simple corners that call for absolute SENS each time in order to maintain pace, the track has earned the name the Penalty Ring. It was perhaps an even greater threat to each of us than we were to each other. On one hand, of course I'm going to be happy with track position, but if the only reason I'm ahead is because of a penalty system that forces the driver to engage the brakes at 100% on a line towards the end of the lap rather than even considering a warning for a track limit offense that gained absolutely no time, well, that just feels cheap. I want to battle my friend, and if I'm ahead, I want to earn it. In reality, this is just another form of the same pressure. Slayers is a fantastic driver who can and will put the pressure on me and monopolize on any mistakes I make. I'm certain he feels the same about the penalties, which is kind of poetic, considering. With that quick bit of the penalty gods balancing our battle, perhaps we can get back to a fair rumble. With J-Funk still behind, it wouldn't make sense for us to battle while I still had the penalty, so Slayers just pushed or backed off until the penalty zone. After I served the penalty, things were once again as they were before Slayers served his, except this time, J-Funk was right behind. If I were to lose slip from Slayers, or even if not, J-Funk could absolutely introduce the G70 into our battle, and perhaps that would be a poetic way of sealing the coffin the Evo had been in for nearly 20 years now. If I were to lose slip from Slayers, or even if not, J-Funk could absolutely introduce the G70 into our battle, and perhaps that would be a poetic way of sealing the coffin the Evo had been in for the last 20 years. A big body grocery getter outpacing the legendary Evo and chasing down a WRX would certainly fit in this current timeline where JDM sports cars are few and far between. Two former champions long past their prime, showing their age in a final gasp for relevance in their golden years. Nah, I'm just being dramatic. This is just a poorly bopped Group 4, and I wasn't giving up on chasing down the boxer. With Slayers hitting a respectable 38.1 in race, I found myself hot in his tail with full slipstream going into T2, minimizing the gap so I can apply pressure and come up with a plan. In situations like this, if the fight seems fair, then I generally try to separate before attacking. If I were to start making moves this early on, it would just let J-Funk get closer, and introducing a fast driver in the meta card to our off-meta battle would be far too chaotic and unpredictable. Chances are, we'd both lose out. First things first, however, and I still hadn't gotten to a point where I could even make a move, so I needed to continue putting on the pressure. At the beginning of the next lap, I had still maintained the distance between myself and Slayers, and luckily we had put a little bit more distance between ourselves and J-Funk. However, Slayers unfortunately got another penalty. At this point, it was just funny, but again, when he served his, he'd have a wild J-Funk on his tail, and I would only be in front because of that penalty. On top of that, I couldn't imagine going another 8 laps without a penalty myself. On to lap 6, Slayers is still directly on my rear bumper, and J-Funk is still very much within striking range, and if you know this game, then you know that was a pretty dodgy way to take turn 1. Once again, the game was balancing out our battle, and when I served it, we'd be back to where we had been as far back as the first lap, only this time, the race was going to be half over. As much as this seemed like Groundhog's Day, I held hope that Slayers and I could finally wrestle these cars into submission and finally just end up battling each other. Looking at the delta between myself and J-Funk, he was still just barely in the slipstream, but I was luckily still closer to Slayers, so my slipstream benefit would even those odds out just a bit. All I had to do was increase the distance to J-Funk and continue to push for a bit until we were clear enough to start really going after each other. At the end of lap 7, we had made a bit of ground trying to lose the beautiful J-Funk, and I was close enough to give Slayers one more boost to try to give us some more space. After hitting a 37.6, improving my already fastest lap of a 37.8, I was feeling a lot better in the Evo, and it seemed safe enough to start trying to pull off some moves on Slayers. One funny side effect of pushing your opponent with bump drafting is that sometimes they won't know if you're going to bump draft or just go for a pass. I think Slayers probably expected it and wanted the outside, however, as he knows he can trust me and the outside line would potentially be faster. If not an outside line, the good old switcheroo would be possible if he were to take advantage of my tight line into the corner, but I was able to get a good exit. Knowing Slayers would return the favor on the next corner, I still opted to stay on the outside, as I found in the previous race the Evo was really tough to maintain pace on the inside of turn 3, and since I knew I could trust Slayers not to Verstappen me, I felt comfortable staying on the outside line. After using every inch of track we both had, it appeared we would be side by side into the next corner, but I was able to just barely clear his bumper, so I once again decided to take the normal line, thinking I could maintain speed better on the outside, but this time, Slayers didn't attack. After looking in the rear view, I once again detected a rapid J-Funk closing in, so I can only assume Slayers wanted to get a bit more distance before trying to resume the battle. There was still a lot of time left in the race. Coming out of turn 1 in the next lap, the tables had now turned. Slayers was right on my tail with a better run out of the corner and slipstream. Once again staying on the outside and seeing how fast Slayers was on T2, I figured he would probably be too quick into the corner for me to match, so I opted for the switchback. It worked perfectly, but despite the run I got, the nature of the track means that Slayers would still be very much in striking distance still. Since I had so much luck on the outside last time, I once again tried to defend the same way. One of the qualities you need as a great racing driver is adaptability, and just because he didn't lock it down the first time he tried for the inside doesn't mean it wasn't possible. Instead, Slayers immediately learned what he could do better and absolutely nailed the pass. This time going into turn 4, Slayers not only had the track position, but also had the benefit of the outside line. This is of course only a benefit when you're racing people who respect racing and racecraft, and since we both do, he dusted me through this section. This time, J-Funk was still a ways back, so it was just Slayers and I, but unfortunately for me, Slayers seems to have really found his pace. Not one to be caught off guard, Slayers initially defended going into the next corner, but it became apparent pretty quickly that I was not going to be a threat for at least a little while. Still feeling like there was a lot of life left in this battle, I continued trying to push and stay close enough to make a move when the time was right. Slayers was just a little bit quicker each and every corner at this point, but thanks to the custom slipstream, it helped neutralize that. Wanting to put as much pressure on him as possible and feeling more confident with my abilities in this car, I tried to stay just inches from him into the braking zone, but ultimately that was a mistake. I braked way too late and pretty much almost locked up the front tires, causing me to go extremely slow into that corner in order to avoid hitting him, and that put a lot of distance between us. Despite there still only being 0.5 between us at this point, with his consistency and my loss of momentum, it was going to be quite a while before I could get close to him again. A full lap later, and I'd only cut 0.2 out of his lead, and not only that, he was in the zone. Each time I got close, it was into a braking zone, and he was slowing more effectively and absolutely flying out of each corner. I had to reset my mind and stop trying to make up for the mistake I made. I had to focus on apexes and exits and pretend like he wasn't there. The final lap. I was pretty much in the exact situation I had been in the lap before, but I managed to focus up and start driving just a bit better once again. As we negotiated turn 1 for the final time, I had gotten just a bit of a run on him, and that was enough to mount an attack. If I could get any overlap going into the braking zone, I was going to go for the inside pass, but if not, then I'd slot in behind and try to use the slip. Not needing to shift into the 5th gave me just the smallest bit of an edge that I needed, and I decided to rely on the all-wheel drive and try to floor it and rotate. Getting the rotation I needed worked out, but the loss of momentum meant that we were going to be side by side into the next corner. And while I thought I wouldn't be able to pass or defend on the inside, I knew I could easily lose it on the outside too, so I was just going to have to do what I could. As I braked into the corner, I saw the radar out of the corner of my eye, and I saw the arrow slayers flying past on the outside, and by mid-corner, he was already there. With a clean side-by-side exit, it seemed I was going to be forced into an outside position, but I was just barely in front, so I decided to try the inside again, this time from a bit ahead. Incredibly, Slayers had put himself directly on the outside again, so my exit was pinched and the battle continued. Negotiating this next corner is tough enough by herself, and Slayers navigated it perfectly as I had a compromised line. With the momentum he had coming out of the corner, we were set for a final fistfight into the penultimate corner. Deciding to stay on the inside and defend, I didn't realize until too late that he was still far enough back that he would be able to perfectly slide in next to me and we'd be side to side until the very end. I had no choice but to try to stay on the outside, and I made the mistake of turning in far too early. Looking at the radar, I think Slayers actually gave me enough space, but sensing contact, as a gentleman, Slayers lifted a ton so the penalty I would get would still put me in first place. Just like in real life, the WRX lives on and the Evo will only be a memory. Once again, I'm just joking. I had a fantastic time somehow making the weak bop of the Rally Legends work. Big shout out to Slayers for being a great sport and an amazing driver, as well as a massive shout out to the ever supportive J-Funk. I'd like to also recognize Race Pace in 4th as having been a great supporter over the years. I appreciate you very much, sir. I hope you guys like this breakdown as much as I enjoyed doing it, and I'm going to leave you with a look at my current members who I love very much. Thank y'all.